Marcus's hand trembled as it touched Vivienne's face. The bedroom was bathed in silvery moonlight, streaming through the half-open window, making the linen curtains dance gently. The scent of lavender came from the freshly laundered white sheets, so crisp they seemed never to have been touched. "You're safe with me," Marcus whispered, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw. Vivienne closed her eyes, letting those words penetrate every corner of her heart. At 23, with her deep hazel eyes that always reflected more hope than they should, she believed with every fiber of her being. They had married that morning, a simple ceremony at the small church in the village where she'd grown up, surrounded by the same wild roses that had perfumed the gardens since her childhood. Her mother cried throughout the entire ceremony, clutching a white handkerchief between fingers calloused from years of sewing. Her father, a man of few words and hands marked by hard labor, gave her away at the altar with a look that mixed pride with something Vivienne couldn't decipher. Perhaps fear, perhaps just the natural melancholy of watching a daughter leave. Marcus was different from all the men she'd known. At 36, he had a presence that filled any room. He wore impeccable suits that contrasted with the simple clothes of the villagers. His imported car, parked in front of Vivienne's family's modest house, had been the subject of conversation throughout the neighborhood during the weeks leading up to the wedding. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice breaking the bedroom's silence. Vivienne opened her eyes and looked at him. Marcus's face was angular, marked by a well-groomed beard that gave him an air of sophistication. His eyes were dark, almost black in that dim light. "About how quickly everything changed," she answered, her voice carrying the honesty that had always characterized her. 3 months ago I didn't even know you. And now you're my wife," he completed, smiling in that way that made her melt. "And I'm going to take care of you. I'll give you the life you deserve, far from this place." The promise sounded like music. Vivienne thought of her mother, exhausted after another full day bent over the sewing machine. She thought of her father, coming home with his back aching from construction work. She thought of the small house, the bills that were never enough, the dreams that died before they could even bloom. Marcus moved closer, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that promised eternity. When he pulled her closer, Vivienne smelled his woody cologne, felt the firmness of the arms that enveloped her, felt finally protected. But if she had paid more attention, she might have noticed how his eyes drifted to the clock on the wall, how his fingers drummed impatiently against her back, how for a fraction of a second his face assumed an expression that didn't match the moment, an expression of someone calculating, measuring, planning. Vivienne didn't see. She was too busy building castles in the sand. The next morning they woke to the sun flooding the room. Marcus was already dressed when she opened her eyes, adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. "Good morning," Vivienne murmured, still drowsy. "Good morning, love," he replied, but didn't turn to look at her. "I need to take care of some things today, business that can't wait." "The day after our wedding?" "Unfortunately, yes, but don't worry." Now he turned, offering that rehearsed smile. "I'll be back before dinner. You can start packing your things. We leave for the city early tomorrow." Vivienne sat up in bed, pulling the sheet to cover her shoulders. Something about this rush bothered her, but she pushed the feeling away. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Perfectly fine," Marcus approached, kissing her forehead quickly. "It's just work, nothing major." He left before she could ask anything else. Vivienne heard the apartment door close, then the sound of footsteps going down the stairs, finally the roar of the car engine departing. She was alone for the first time since the ceremony. The apartment they'd rented for the honeymoon was small but cozy, with antique furniture and paintings on the walls showing pastoral landscapes. She got up, walking to the window. Outside, the small town was beginning its day. The bakery on the corner was already open, the smell of fresh bread rising up the street. People walked along the sidewalks, greeting each other by name. It was the world she knew, the world she was about to leave behind. Vivienne spent the day packing the few things she'd brought. 2 suitcases, a few boxes with photographs and mementos. Her entire life fit into so little space. In the afternoon, her mother appeared, bringing a package of homemade treats. "I made your favorites," the woman said, entering with that timid way of someone who doesn't want to intrude. "I thought you and Marcus might—" "He went out to work," Vivian explained, taking the package from her mother's hands. "The day after the wedding?" There was concern in her voice. "He's a busy man, Mum." "That's good. It means he's responsible." Vivian's mother looked around the apartment, her eyes settling on the details. Marcus's suitcase left in the corner, still closed, his mobile phone forgotten charging in the socket, some papers on the table that looked like contracts. "Vivian, dear," she began, then stopped. "What is it?" "Nothing, I just wanted to say that if you ever need anything, our house is always open." "Mum, I'm happy." Vivian held her mother's calloused hands. "For the first time, I feel like I have a future ahead of me." Her mother nodded, but her eyes said something else. They said that a mother always knows when something isn't right. But the words didn't come, and soon she was leaving Vivian alone again with her thoughts and hopes. Marcus returned late at night. He came through the door with a tired face, his tie loose, and went straight to the bathroom without saying a word. Vivian heard the shower turn on, heard him humming a song she didn't recognize. When he finally came out, with wet hair and a towel around his waist, he seemed like a different man, lighter, more present. "Sorry for taking so long," he said, sitting on the bed next to her. "It was more complicated than I expected." "Do you want to talk about it?" "It's nothing you need to worry about, just bureaucratic company matters." Vivian accepted the answer because she wanted to believe, because it was easier to trust than to doubt, because she had bet everything on this man, and going back now would mean admitting she might have made a mistake. They lay down together, his body warming hers in the cold night, but Vivian couldn't fall asleep immediately. She lay looking at the ceiling, listening to Marcus's breathing become deeper and more regular, and as the moon moved across the sky, casting different shadows through the curtains, a single word echoed in her mind, small but insistent. He had said she was safe. But why, then, was a part of her already beginning to doubt? The capital welcomed Vivian with a chaotic embrace. Marcus's flat was on the 12th floor of an old but elegant building, with a view of a park where trees formed a green sea that stretched as far as the eye could see. The tall windows let in golden light that spread across the polished wooden floor. "It's all ours," Marcus announced, opening his arms as if presenting a kingdom. Vivian walked slowly through the space, her fingers sliding over the furniture. Everything was much more beautiful than she'd imagined. The spacious living room with brown leather sofas, the modern kitchen with gleaming appliances, the master bedroom with an enormous bed covered by a white duvet like snow. "It's perfect," she whispered, and it was true. In the first few weeks, Vivian dedicated herself to transforming that space into a home. She bought light curtains that let the sun in each morning, plants for the balconies, colorful paintings for the white walls. Marcus observed her choices with approval, always saying she had good taste, that she knew how to make things beautiful. He left early every morning, impeccable in his dark suits, carrying the leather briefcase he never let go of. Vivian would wake to prepare his breakfast, toast with butter and scrambled eggs that he ate quickly before leaving with a kiss on her cheek. "See you later, love. Don't wait up for lunch, I have meetings all day." And off he'd go, leaving behind only the scent of his cologne and the sound of the door closing. Vivian began to explore the neighborhood, the bakery on the corner, where the rosy-cheeked baker always gave her a sample of still warm bread. The market 2 blocks away, with its colorful piles of fruits and vegetables. The public library, an old stone building where the smell of old books comforted her in a way she couldn't explain. It was at the library that she met Mrs. Cecilia, the neighbor from the floor below, a woman with silver hair always pulled back in an elegant bun, gold-rimmed glasses, and a smile that lit up her wrinkled face. "You must be Marcus's new wife," Cecilia said, approaching with a book in her hands. "I'm your neighbor from flat 11B. Vivian," she introduced herself, extending her hand. "Pleasure, dear. I see you also appreciate good reading." They began to talk, and minutes turned into an hour. Cecilia was a widow, having lost her husband 10 years before. She'd been a solicitor throughout her professional life, now retired and dedicated to volunteer work. She had a way of speaking that was both gentle and firm, like someone who knew the world and wouldn't be easily fooled. "If you need anything, my door is always open," Cecilia offered as they said goodbye. I know how lonely it can be adapting to a new city." Vivian thanked her, not yet knowing how much she would need that offer. At night, when Marcus arrived, he was always tired. They'd have dinner together. He'd tell vague stories about work, meetings that ran long, difficult clients, complicated contracts. Vivian listened, asked questions, but his answers were always evasive, full of technical terms she didn't understand. "What exactly do you do?" she asked one evening, serving him more wine. "Business consulting," he answered quickly. "I help companies optimize processes, increase profits. It's quite technical. You wouldn't find it interesting." "Maybe I would." He smiled, but there was something mechanical about that smile. "Trust me, it's extremely boring. I'd rather talk about you. How was your day?" And so he always deflected, always redirected, always kept his own activities in a convenient fog. At the end of the first month, Marcus announced he needed to travel. "Just a week," he said, packing in the bedroom while Vivian watched from the doorway. "An important client in another city, impossible to handle remotely." "Which city?" "You wouldn't know it. Countryside, quite far from here. Dull place, but the client pays well. Can I come with you?" He stopped what he was doing and stared at her. "Love, there'd be nothing for you to do there. I'll be locked in meetings all day. You'd be bored. But we'd be together at night." "Vivian," there was a hint of impatience in his voice now, "I need total focus on this trip. It's important for our future, for our financial security. A week passes quickly." She stepped back, feeling chastised, though he hadn't shouted. "Of course. Sorry." His face softened. "No, I apologize. I'm stressed about this trip. You know I'd rather stay here with you, right?" He pulled her into a hug, and Vivian let herself be enveloped, but something about that moment left her uneasy. The next morning, Marcus left before dawn. Vivian woke to the sound of the door closing and found a note in the kitchen. "Back soon. Take care. M." The week dragged on. Vivian tried to fill the days with activities. She cleaned the flat until every corner gleamed, reorganized the kitchen 3 times, read 2 entire books. But the nights were long and lonely. Marcus called occasionally, brief conversations where his voice sounded distant, where background noises suggested busy places. "Where are you?" she asked during one of these calls, hearing what sounded like music in the background. "At the hotel, there's an event here. I had to attend. Networking matters. Listen, I've been called on the other line. Need to go." And he was gone, before she could say she missed him. It was during that week that Vivian began to clean more deeply in the flat. On the 3rd day alone, she decided to organize Marcus's bedside table drawers. He always said she could use any space in the house, that there were no secrets between them. Under a pile of ties, her fingers touched paper. She pulled out an old letter, the paper yellowed by time. The handwriting was feminine, delicate, in faded blue ink. Vivian's heart raced. She turned the letter over, looking for a date, an address, anything. But there were only those words, suspended in time. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the letter trembling between her fingers. Maybe it was old, from before they met. Marcus was an attractive man. He certainly had a past. It wouldn't be fair to judge based on an old letter. But then why keep it? Why not throw it away? When Marcus returned a week later, Vivian was determined to ask about the letter. But the moment he came through the door, carrying a shopping bag with gifts for her, a blue dress she'd admired in a shop window, imported chocolates, fresh flowers, her determination wavered. "I missed you so much," he said, holding her face in his hands. "It was the longest week of my life." "I missed you too," she replied, and it was true. They had dinner together. He told funny stories about the difficult client, made her laugh for the first time in days. And when they were finally lying in the dark, with him sleeping deeply beside her, Vivian held the letter she'd hidden under her pillow. Tomorrow, tomorrow, she'd ask. But tomorrow brought new distractions, new occupations, and the letter was put away again, along with the doubt that was beginning to germinate like a dark seed in fertile soil. The second month brought a routine that should have been comforting, but that for Vivian was beginning to feel suffocating. Marcus had established rigid patterns. He always woke at 6, showered for exactly 15 minutes, left for work at 7. He returned between 7 and 8 in the evening, had dinner, watched the news on television, and slept at 10. On weekends, when Vivian hoped they'd spend time together, he always had something pending: paperwork that needed reviewing, calls that couldn't wait, commitments that arose at the last minute. "I thought we could go to the park," she suggested one Saturday, seeing him for the 10th time that morning answer his mobile in another room. "Maybe later," he replied, covering the device with his hand. "I need to sort this out first." This was never specified, and later never came. Vivian began spending more time with Mrs. Cecilia. The neighbor had a cozy bedsit, full of books and old photographs. She made chamomile tea with honey that warmed not just the body, but also the soul. "How's married life, dear?" Cecilia asked one day, serving tea in delicate porcelain cups. "Fine," Vivian replied automatically, but her voice didn't sound convincing even to herself. Cecilia observed her over her glasses. "You know, I spent 40 years as a solicitor. I learned to read people. And you, my dear, are carrying a weight you shouldn't be." Vivian felt her eyes sting. She wasn't used to someone seeing her so clearly. "It's just adjustment," she murmured. "New city, new life. And new husband. Marcus is good to me. He gives me everything I need. Except time, except real attention, except transparency." Cecilia's words were like a punch to the stomach. Vivienne set down her cup, feeling her hands tremble. "It's not like that, isn't it?" Cecilia leaned forward. "Vivienne, I may be overstepping, and if so, I apologize. But I've seen this pattern before. Men who are overly generous with gifts but miserly with truths, who are always busy but never specify with what, who." "He's building our future," Vivian interrupted, her voice louder than intended. "Working hard so I don't have to worry about anything." Cecilia leaned back, her gaze softening. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps I'm just a cynical old woman. But promise me one thing, keep your eyes open, and if you ever need help and if you find something that doesn't fit, you know where to find me." Vivian left that afternoon with a heavy heart. She wanted to be angry with Cecilia for planting seeds of doubt, but deep down, she knew the neighbor was merely vocalizing concerns that already whispered in her own mind. That night, during dinner, she decided to confront Marcus about the letter. "I found something when I was organizing your things," she began, pushing food around her plate without appetite. He responded, focused on the piece of meat he was cutting. "A letter, from someone called L." His hands stopped. It was only a fraction of a second, but Vivian noticed. Then he continued cutting as if nothing had happened. "Oh, that," he said, his voice too casual. "That's from my cousin Lillian. She was going through a difficult time a few years ago, complicated relationship. We used to correspond when she needed to vent." The letter seemed intimate. "We were close as children. She's always been dramatic, exaggerated her words." He finally looked at Vivian, his smile reassuring. "Why? Are you jealous of a cousin?" "No, I just—" "Vivian." He put down his fork and took her hand across the table. "If something bothers you, you can always ask. I have nothing to hide from you." The words were right. The tone was right. But something in his eyes, a fraction of a second where his expression seemed calculated, made Vivian's stomach tighten. "So I'm of course sorry for doubting. You don't need to apologize. It's natural to have these insecurities early in marriage." He went back to eating, the subject apparently closed. But for Vivian, the subject was far from closed. The explanation was reasonable, but why then did she feel she'd been manipulated? Why did the conversation leave her more uneasy than before? In the following weeks, Vivian began to pay more attention. She noticed how Marcus always turned his mobile face down when he placed it on the table, how he locked his work briefcase with a small but efficient padlock, how, when she entered his office unexpectedly, he quickly closed windows on the computer. "Confidential client documents," he always explained. "Professional secrecy." It seemed reasonable. Everything always seemed reasonable. One day, while Marcus was in the shower, his mobile rang on the bedside table. Vivian looked at the illuminated screen. "Central office," Do not answer. What kind of office asks not to be answered? Before she could think much about it, Marcus came out of the bathroom, picked up the mobile and glanced at it quickly. "Spam," he said, hanging up without answering. "Your office calls through spam?" He laughed, a forced sound. "No, love. Central office is the name I gave to automated telemarketing calls. That way I know not to answer." Again, reasonable explanation. Again, a chill down her spine. At the end of that month, Marcus announced another trip. 3 days this time, client in the south. "Which region? Can I visit you on the last day?" "Vivian, we've discussed this. These trips are intensive work. You'd distract me, and I don't mean that negatively, but I really need focus." "Can I never come with you?" "When things stabilize, I promise we'll take a proper holiday, just the two of us. A resort, beach, those things you deserve." Promises, always promises for an indefinite future. This time, when he left, Vivian made a decision. She waited until she was sure Marcus was far away, then took his old laptop that was kept in the wardrobe. He always used a new one, saying the old one was too slow for work. She took the computer to the public library, where the internet was free. Her heart beat rapidly as she waited for the machine to start, feeling simultaneously guilty and determined. She needed the password. She tried his date of birth. Incorrect. She tried their wedding date. Incorrect. Then, almost by chance, she tried M182R3C4U5s, his name with numbers interspersed. The screen unlocked. Vivian explored the computer with trembling hands. The files were meticulously organized. She found folders of contracts. All seemed legitimate, dense business documents. She found financial spreadsheets, numbers that didn't mean much to her. She was about to give up when she saw a hidden folder called simply P. She clicked. Inside were subfolders with female names: Lauren, Beatrice, Simone, and the last one that made her forget to breathe, Vivian. With numb fingers, she opened the folder with her own name. Inside was a document. She clicked. It was a profile. Her profile. Age, family history, physical characteristics, but also assessments. Vulnerable, recent death of grandmother. Emotional dependence on family. Low self-esteem disguised. Excessive kindness, exploitable weakness. Vivian felt nausea rise in her throat. She continued reading, each word a blow. Approach, present as savior. Receptive family due to financial situation. Minimal resistance expected. Ideal profile for Phase 3 of project. What was this? What did project mean? She clicked on one of the other folders. Lauren, another profile, similar structure. Recent widow, heiress to rural property. Social isolation facilitates approach. Beatrice. Divorced, low self-esteem, desperate to start over. Each folder was a file on a woman, each woman carefully studied, catalogued, with approach strategies noted like military plans. Vivian felt the world spin. She closed the laptop abruptly, drawing curious looks in the silent library. She needed to stand up, walk to the bathroom where she locked herself in a cubicle and finally allowed the tears to come. She wasn't special. She wasn't loved. She was a target. When she finally composed herself enough to leave, Vivian walked the streets aimlessly, the laptop weighing in her bag like proof of a truth that shattered everything she'd believed. 2 questions hammered in her mind. How many of these women actually existed in his life now? And how had she been so blind? Vivian didn't return to the flat immediately. She sat on a bench in the park opposite the building, watching the windows of the 12th floor. The curtains she'd chosen herself swayed gently in the wind. That place that should have been her home now seemed like a prison disguised as a dream. It was 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Marcus was still traveling, would only return on Sunday. She had time to think, to plan. But think about what? And plan what? A mother passed by with a child holding hands. The boy was laughing at something she said, a pure and innocent sound that contrasted brutally with the darkness inside Vivian. She wondered if she'd have children with Marcus. If she didn't already. The thought made her groan softly. She brought her hand to her stomach. though there was nothing there but emptiness and nausea. The mobile rang. It was Marcus. Vivienne looked at the name flashing on the screen for long seconds before answering. "Hi," her voice came out weak. "Love, I managed to get a break from meetings. How are you?" How was she? Destroyed, betrayed, deceived. But what she said was, "Fine, missing you." "Me too. Listen, I'm going to extend the trip by 2 more days. An opportunity came up that I can't pass up. Do you mind?" "Mind?" she wanted to scream. "Do I mind that you're a liar? That I'm just one more on a list?" "No problem," she said. "You're perfect, you know. So understanding. Sending you a kiss, need to get back to the meeting." He hung up before she could respond. Vivienne sat staring at the phone. Then, seized by an impulse, she opened the browser and typed the name of the company where Marcus supposedly worked, Horizon Business Consulting. The results showed a professional website, photos of offices, staff. But when she clicked on Contact, the address listed didn't exist. She checked on Google Maps. The street number jumped from 432 to 448. Number 442, where the office supposedly was, simply didn't exist. She tried calling the telephone number listed. A recording. "The number you have dialed does not exist or is out of area." Everything was fake. The company, the work, probably even the name Marcus. She needed help. She needed to tell someone. But who would believe? She herself could barely believe. Cecilia. She would believe. Vivienne went up to the neighbor's flat and rang the bell urgently. When the door opened, revealing Cecilia's concerned face, the words poured out. "You were right. About everything. I found... I don't know what to do." Cecilia pulled her inside, guided her to the sofa, made tea before even asking for explanations. "Breathe, dear, breathe deeply and tell me from the beginning." Vivienne told everything. The letter, the constant trips, the computer, the profiles, the notes about her, about other women. As she spoke, she saw Cecilia's expression change from concern to horror, then to a cold determination. "Do you still have the laptop?" Cecilia asked when Vivienne finished. "In my bag. May I see it?" Vivienne handed over the computer. Cecilia put on her glasses and navigated through the files with the efficiency of someone accustomed to dealing with evidence. Her lips formed a thin line as she read. "Vivienne, this is much worse than I imagined," she finally said. "You realize what this is? A monster I married." "A criminal," Cecilia corrected. "This is evidence of planned fraud, possibly bigamy or attempted bigamy. These profiles, he's manipulating vulnerable women. You're not the first, and from what I'm seeing here, won't be the last." "What do I do?" Cecilia thought for a long moment. "First, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. These other women, Lauren, Beatrice, Simone, we need to find out if they're real people, if he has active relationships with them. After that, we can decide the next steps." "How will we find out?" "You said he returns Sunday. That gives us a day. Do you trust me?" Vivienne looked at this silver-haired woman she barely knew, but who, in that moment, was her only ally. "I trust you." "Then let's work." They spent Saturday investigating. Cecilia had contacts from her years as a solicitor, people who knew how to find information, some discreet calls, some favors called in. By the end of the afternoon, they had a clearer picture. Lauren existed. She lived in a town 3 hours away. She really was a widow. And according to records that Cecilia managed to access through a contact at the registry office, was legally married to a man named Marcus Henry Fitzgerald. Beatrice also existed. Also married to someone called Marcus, but the surname was different, Marcus Andrew Sullivan. Simone, the same thing, Marcus Robert Collins. "He uses different identities," Cecilia explained, showing blurred copies of certificates. Documents probably fake but convincing enough to pass through registry offices in small towns. "My God, Vivienne, you're married to a serial bigamist." "Legally married." "Let's check." More calls. More favors. And finally confirmation. There was no legal record of Vivienne and Marcus's marriage. The church ceremony was real, but the documents were never registered. She wasn't legally his wife. "At least that's good news," Cecilia said, seeing Vivienne's pale face. It means you can leave without bureaucratic complications. But these other women, they don't know he... Probably not. And Vivienne, there may be more. These are just the names we found on the computer. There could be others. The magnitude of the situation hit her like a wave. It wasn't just about her. There were other women, deceived, trapped in relationships based on lies, living false lives without knowing it. We need to warn them, Vivienne said, her voice gaining strength. They need to know the truth. I agree. But we need to be careful. If Marcus finds out you know... He returns tomorrow. I'm going to confront him. Vivienne, I don't know if it's safe. I need to look him in the eyes. I need to hear him try to explain this. Cecilia held her hands. Then don't do it alone. I'll be here, one call away. If anything seems dangerous, you shout and I'll ring the police immediately. Vivienne agreed, though she knew she probably wouldn't shout. She'd spent her entire life being polite, understanding, avoiding confrontations. But something inside her had changed. Those profiles, those clinical notes about her vulnerabilities, had ignited a rage she never knew she possessed. Sunday arrived grey and rainy. Vivienne prepared the flat meticulously. She left the laptop open on the living room table, the incriminating folders exposed. She wanted him to see. She wanted to see his reaction when he realized he'd been discovered. At 6 in the evening, she heard the key in the lock. Marcus entered carrying his suitcase, his hair wet from rain, smiling that smile that used to melt her and now nauseated her. I'm home. You can't imagine the week I had. This client was impossible, but we finally closed the... He stopped, seeing the laptop open on the table. The smile froze on his face. What's this? He asked, but his voice no longer had the same confidence. You tell me, Vivienne replied, crossing her arms. She was standing near the window, keeping distance. Marcus Henry Fitzgerald. Marcus Andrew Sullivan. Marcus Robert Collins. What's your real name? He put down his suitcase slowly, eyes calculating, assessing the situation. Vivienne, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain Lauren, Beatrice, Simone? Can you explain why I'm just a vulnerable profile in your files? You don't understand the context. Then explain. Explain how you marry multiple women. Explain the fake documents. Explain why our marriage wasn't even registered. Vivienne, there was a hint of impatience in his voice now. I need total focus on this trip. It's important for our future, for our financial security. A week passes quickly. She stepped back, feeling scolded though he hadn't shouted. Of course, sorry. His face softened. No, I apologize. I'm stressed about this trip. You know I'd rather stay here with you, right? He pulled her into a hug, and Vivienne let herself be enveloped, but something about that moment left her uneasy. The next morning, Marcus left before dawn. Vivienne woke to the sound of the door closing and found a note in the kitchen. Back soon. Take care. M. The week dragged on. Vivienne tried to fill the days with activities. She cleaned the flat until every corner gleamed, reorganized the kitchen 3 times, read 2 entire books. But the nights were long and lonely. Marcus called occasionally, brief conversations where his voice sounded distant, where background noises suggested busy places. Where are you? She asked during one of these calls, hearing what sounded like music in the background. At the hotel, there's an event here. I had to attend. Networking matters. Listen, I've been called on the other line. Need to go. And he was gone before she could say she missed him. It was during that week that Vivienne began to clean more deeply in the flat. On the 3rd day alone, she decided to organize Marcus's bedside table drawers. He always said she could use any space in the house, that there were no secrets between them. Under a pile of ties, her fingers touched paper. She pulled out an old letter, the paper yellowed by time. The handwriting was feminine, delicate, in faded blue ink. Vivienne's heart raced. She turned the letter over, looking for a date, an address, anything. But there were only those words, suspended in time. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the letter trembling between her fingers. Maybe it was old, from before they met. Marcus was an attractive man. He certainly had a past. It wouldn't be fair to judge based on an old letter. But then why keep it? Why not throw it away? When Marcus returned a week later, Vivienne was determined to ask about the letter. But the moment he came through the door, carrying a shopping bag with gifts for her, a blue dress she'd admired in a shop window, imported chocolates, fresh flowers, her determination wavered. "I missed you so much," he said, holding her face in his hands. "It was the longest week of my life." "I missed you too," she replied, and it was true. They had dinner together. He told funny stories about the difficult client, made her laugh for the first time in days. And when they were finally lying in the dark, with him sleeping deeply beside her, Vivian held the letter she'd hidden under her pillow. Tomorrow, tomorrow, she'd ask. But tomorrow brought new distractions, new occupations, and the letter was put away again, along with the doubt that was beginning to germinate like a dark seed in fertile soil. Monday dawned with a clear sky that contrasted brutally with the storm inside Vivian. She couldn't sleep. She spent the night staring at the ceiling, reliving every moment of the last few months, identifying the red flags she'd ignored, the obvious lies she'd accepted because she wanted to believe. At 7 in the morning, Cecilia rang the doorbell, carrying fresh coffee and bread from the bakery. "Strength, dear," she said, entering without invitation. "We have a lot of work ahead." They sat at the kitchen table, that same table where Vivian had served dinners to a man who never really existed. "How are we going to do this?" Vivian asked, holding the cup as if it were an anchor. "How are we going to tell these women that their lives are lies?" Carefully, with evidence and in person, Cecilia opened a notebook where she'd made notes during the investigation. "I have Lauren and Beatrice's addresses. Simone is more complicated. She lives very far away. But let's start with the first two. Will they believe us?" "Not immediately, but we have proof. The documents, the profiles, the marriage records. It's undeniable." Vivian thought about how she'd feel if a stranger appeared at her door saying her marriage was a farce. "It's going to devastate them," she murmured. "But it's the truth, and the truth, however painful, is still better than living in a lie." Cecilia was right. Vivian knew that. But the weight of responsibility was crushing. They spent the morning planning. Cecilia used her contacts to get official copies of the fake marriage documents. They printed everything from Marcus's laptop, every profile, every note, every documented strategy. "Take this to a safe place," Cecilia instructed. "Make copies, keep them in different places. If Marcus realizes he's lost the laptop and tries to recover evidence, he already knows I know. He won't try." "Vivian," Cecilia's tone was firm. "Men like Marcus don't give up easily. He'll try to regain control. It could be through charm. It could be through intimidation. You need to be prepared." They decided to start with Lauren. She lived closer, in a town called Meadowbrook, 3 hours' drive away. Cecilia offered to drive. They left on Thursday before dawn. The road cut through rolling fields where wheat grew golden under the rising sun. Vivian watched the landscape pass, thinking about how just 3 months ago she'd made this same journey in the opposite direction, full of hopes and dreams. Now she returned carrying truths that would destroy another woman. Meadowbrook was a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone and secrets don't last long. They found Lauren's house easily, a simple but well-kept construction with a flower garden in front. "Ready?" Cecilia asked, turning off the engine. Vivian wasn't, but she nodded anyway. They knocked on the door. Footsteps approached. The door opened, revealing a woman of about 40, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, apron tied at the waist. Her eyes were kind, with smile lines at the corners. "Can I help you?" she asked, wiping her hands on the apron. "Lauren Mitchell?" Cecilia asked. "Yes, you are." "My name is Cecilia, and this is Vivian. May we talk? It's about your husband, Marcus." Lauren's face closed immediately. "What happened? Is he all right? He traveled yesterday and hasn't called yet." "He's physically fine," Vivian spoke for the first time. "But we need to talk to you. It's important." Lauren looked at them suspiciously, but opened the door. "Come in." The house was cozy. Photos of Lauren and Marcus smiling, embracing in various places. Vivian recognized the suit he wore in one of the photos. It was the same one he'd worn at her own wedding. The same suit, identical promises, twin lies. "What do you want to talk about, Marcus?" Lauren asked, sitting stiffly on the sofa. Vivian and Cecilia exchanged glances. Cecilia pulled documents from her bag, organizing them on the coffee table. "Mrs. Lauren," Cecilia began in her professional solicitor's voice, "what I'm about to say will be difficult to hear, but I ask that you listen to us until the end and then judge for yourself." And then she told everything. She showed the documents, the profiles, the evidence. Vivian watched Lauren's face change. Initial disbelief, irritation at them coming with these accusations, confusion upon seeing the documents, growing horror as she understood the magnitude of the deception. "No," Lauren finally said, pushing the papers back. "This is absurd. Marcus would never—" "We've been married for 12 years. 12 years!" "And during those 12 years," Vivian spoke softly, "did he travel a lot? Had commitments he could never miss? He works. Of course he travels. And did you know his office, his colleagues? Did you ever visit him at work?" Lauren opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Her face paled. "He said it was confidential, that he couldn't bring family to the office for secrecy reasons." "How did he meet you?" Cecilia asked gently. My husband had passed away. I was alone trying to maintain the property. Marcus appeared interested in buying land. He was kind, attentive when everyone else just wanted to take advantage." Her voice failed. She picked up one of the profiles, reading her own information catalogued like clinical data. "This can't be real." "Mrs. Lauren," Vivian leaned forward, "I know exactly how you feel. Because 3 months ago he met me, studied me exactly the same way, and made me the same promises he made to you." Lauren stared at her, seeing for the first time not an enemy, but a companion in suffering. "How many?" she asked, her voice breaking. "How many of us?" "We've found 4 so far," Cecilia replied, "but there may be more." Lauren's crying began slowly, then transformed into sobs that shook her entire body. Vivian went to her, wrapping her in a hug, 2 strangers who shared the same nightmare. "My property," Lauren finally managed to speak between sobs. "He convinced me to put it in his name. He said it was better for taxes for— My God, I was such an idiot." "You weren't an idiot," Vivian said firmly. "He's a professional liar. He studied how to manipulate each of us." They spent hours talking. Lauren shared her story, how she met Marcus at one of the worst moments of her life, how he seemed to be the answer to all her prayers, how he was patient and charming, until she signed documents transferring properties. "The papers he made me sign," Lauren realized, standing up abruptly. "I need to see my documents." She returned minutes later with a folder full of papers. Cecilia reviewed them with an expert eye. "This is very bad," she finally said. "He does have title to a good portion of your lands, and these loans here, which you signed as guarantor, I don't remember signing that. But it's your signature, isn't it?" Lauren looked more closely and paled even more. "It is. But he said they were insurance documents, that it was for our protection." "He manipulated you into indebting him, and then used it to take more properties," Cecilia explained. "It's matrimonial fraud, criminal. Can I get my lands back? With a good solicitor, perhaps, but it'll be a long battle." Lauren let herself fall into the chair, the weight of truth crushing her. "How will we find the others?" she finally asked. "You want to help?" Vivian asked, surprised. "Of course I want to. He used me, used all of us. I'm not going to let this go unpunished." And so, unexpectedly, they gained an ally. In the following days, they found Beatrice. Her story was similar, but with different nuances. Marcus met her when she'd just gotten divorced, vulnerable and with low self-esteem. He didn't steal money from her, but convinced her to isolate herself from friends and family, making her completely emotionally dependent on him. Seeing Beatrice was even more painful because she was pregnant, 6 months, carrying a child of a man who barely existed. "I can't," she cried, caressing her belly. "I can't have this baby knowing that—" "You can," Vivian interrupted, holding her hands. "The baby isn't at fault, and you're not alone. None of us are alone anymore." And it was true. From unwitting rivals, they'd become a support network. Lauren offered her house as a base of operations. Beatrice, with her computer skills, began investigating Marcus's finances online. Cecilia coordinated the legal aspects. Simone was harder to find. She lived in a distant county, and when they finally managed to contact her by phone, she refused to believe. "You're just bitter ex-girlfriends," she said before hanging up, but a week later, she called back, crying. He asked me to sign papers today, said it was for an investment, but something about the way he pressured me. I started investigating and found... We know, Vivian said gently. And we're here to help. 4 women, 4 stories, 1 devastating truth. They met in person for the first time on a rainy afternoon at Lauren's house. They sat around the kitchen table, initially uncomfortable, not knowing exactly how to act around each other. Then Lauren served coffee, and Beatrice commented on the homemade biscuits, and Simone made a nervous joke about having formed the strangest club in the world. And slowly, the ice broke. They shared stories, laughed at the absurd similarities. He used the same phrases with all of them, the same romantic gestures, even the same gifts. They cried over the losses and betrayals. And finally, they began to plan. "He can't keep doing this," Lauren said, banging her fist on the table. "How many other women has he deceived? How many more will he deceive?" "We need to expose him," agreed Simone. "But how? Police report?" "I already tried," Cecilia admitted. "But laws about bigamy are complicated when marriages aren't legally registered. And civil fraud requires evidence we're only starting to gather." "Then we need more evidence," Beatrice spoke, her voice determined, despite her eyes swollen from crying. "We need to discover everything he did, all the women he deceived, all the money he stole." "And how do we do that?" Vivian asked. The 4 women looked at each other. On their faces, pain was giving way to something more powerful: determination. "We track him," Lauren said. "Just like he tracked us. We turn the tables." And in that moment, in a simple kitchen smelling of fresh coffee, 4 betrayed women became 4 determined investigators. Marcus had created his own adversaries. The following weeks were of intense work. The 4 women, guided by Cecilia's legal experience, mounted an investigative operation that would have been impressive for professionals, let alone victims determined to expose their aggressor. Beatrice, with her technical skills, managed to hack Marcus's mobile phone. It wasn't legal, but at that point none of them cared much about technicalities. "He has 6 different SIM cards," she revealed in one of their weekly meetings, now held via video conference to include Simone. Each one registered under a different name, each one used for a different territory. "Territories?" Vivian repeated. "That's how he organizes. You 4 are the main group, but I found conversations with at least 3 more women he's cultivating." The term cultivating made all their stomachs turn. Women like crops being prepared for harvest. "We need to warn them," Lauren said immediately. "Not yet," Cecilia intervened. "If we warn them now and he realizes he's being tracked, he'll disappear. We need to first build a solid case." Vivian felt torn. The idea of leaving other women to fall into Marcus's clutches sickened her, but Cecilia was right. If he fled, he'd never answer for his crimes. Through the hacked phone, they began mapping Marcus's life. They discovered he had not 4 but 7 different identities. Some were simple variations, Marcus Collins, Marcus Sullivan, but others were completely distinct. There was a Richard Silva, who had a flat in another city, a Fernando Oliveira, who apparently ran a phantom business. "How does he keep all this organized?" Simone asked, impressed despite the horror. "He's meticulous." Beatrice showed spreadsheets she'd found in a hidden cloud. "Look at this. He has a color-coded calendar for each identity, notes about what he told each one, alerts not to confuse dates or names." It was disturbing to see how much he planned, how much effort he put into maintaining multiple parallel lives, without them touching. "I found something else," Beatrice continued, her voice tense. "Financial transactions. He's moving a lot of money. Lauren, do you remember that large transfer he asked for last month? He said it was for stock investment. It went to an account in the Cayman Islands. Untraceable. He's hiding money, probably from all of you, preparing an escape route. So he knows he'll eventually be discovered," Cecilia concluded. "This is standard for a professional con artist. Build empires of lies, drain resources, disappear before everything collapses." The revelation brought new urgency. If Marcus was planning to disappear, they needed to act fast. Vivian took on the task of tracking his physical movements. Using the GPS from the mobile that Beatrice had managed to access, she created a map of all the places he frequented: hotels, restaurants, flats. Each point on the map was probably another woman, another victim. One night following the GPS trail, Vivian found herself outside a luxury building in the city center. According to the app, Marcus was on the 15th floor. She couldn't go up, not without being announced by the porter, but she could wait. 2 hours later, he came out. But he wasn't alone. A young woman, visibly pregnant, held his arm. They laughed at something. He kissed her forehead tenderly. Vivian felt hot tears run down her face. They weren't tears of jealousy. Those feelings for Marcus had died. They were tears for that pregnant woman who had no idea the father of her child was a walking lie. She took a photo. Documented. That was her function now, collect evidence, however painful. She returned home emotionally exhausted. Cecilia was waiting with hot tea. "You don't need to keep doing this," the neighbor said gently. "We already have enough evidence. You're unnecessarily hurting yourself." "I need to," Vivian replied. "I need to see the extent of the lie. I need to understand how I was so blind." "You weren't blind. He's an experienced predator." "But there were signs, so many signs I ignored because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale." Cecilia sat beside her. "You know what I learned in 40 years of law? That sometimes the greatest strength isn't never falling, but getting up after falling. You fell, Vivian. You were knocked down by someone who makes it an art. But look at you now. You're standing, you're fighting, you're protecting other people from suffering what you suffered." The words brought comfort, but also weight, because Vivian knew that when all this ended, when Marcus was exposed and faced consequences, she'd still have to deal with the ruins of her own life. The final confrontation happened earlier than they expected. 1 month after starting the investigation, Marcus appeared at Vivian's flat. She didn't expect to see him. She thought he'd consider her a lost case, a failure in his system. But there he was, knocking on the door at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. "Can I come in?" he asked when she opened the door, and there was something different in his tone, less confidence, more caution. Vivian left the door open but stayed in the corridor, not inviting him inside. "What do you want, Marcus, if that's even really your name?" "It is. Marcus Augustus Fitzgerald. If you want to know the full name—" He smiled without mirth. "Can I come in? We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about. I know you're investigating. I know you met the others. I know you're collecting evidence." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "Vivian, you're making a mistake." "We? The mistake is ours? I never hurt anyone. All the women I have relationships with are happy. I give them what they need: love, security, attention. The fact that I do it with more than one at a time shouldn't—" "Based on lies," Vivian interrupted. "You stole Lauren's property. You isolated Beatrice from all her family. You have a pregnant woman out there who doesn't even know you have 6 others. 7, actually," he corrected, and had the audacity to look proud. "And each of them is better off with me than they were before. You're better off, Vivian. Admit it." She stared at him, looking for some sign of remorse, of conscience. But there was only this twisted logic where he genuinely believed he was doing his victims a favor. "Get out," she said calmly. "If you go to the police, I'll disappear. And then no one will recover anything. Lauren's money. Gone. The pension I promised Beatrice when the baby's born won't exist. You lose more by exposing me than if you leave things as they are. And you continue free to deceive more women? No. Vivian, be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Her voice rose for the first time. "You want me to be reasonable while you have 7 women believing they're your only wives? While you have children who'll never know who their father really is?" "My children know a present and loving father. Isn't that enough?" Vivian realized she was talking to someone fundamentally broken. Marcus wasn't pretending not to see the problem. He genuinely didn't see a problem. "You need help. Professional, psychological." He laughed. "I'm not crazy, Vivian. I'm just different. I can't be content with just one person, one life. I need variety, novelty. Does that make me a monster?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Because you build this variety on others' suffering, on lies, on manipulation." He studied her for a long moment. "You know, I really liked you. more than the others. You had this innocence, this pure kindness. It made me want to be better just for a moment." He sighed. "But you ruined everything by investigating, questioning. You could have been happy in ignorance." "Ignorance isn't happiness, it's just being asleep in your own life." "Pretty words. Let's see if you still think so when you realize destroying me means destroying yourself too." He stepped back. "Last chance, Vivian. Convince the others to stop this, or everyone loses." "We've already lost. You guaranteed that when you decided our lives were pieces in your personal game." Marcus nodded slowly, as if finally accepting he couldn't manipulate her again. "Then see you in court. Or not." He smiled, and there was real coldness there now. "Because maybe I'll just disappear. And then you'll have your evidence, your proof, but no real justice." He turned and left. Vivian closed the door, locking it. Her hands trembled. She immediately called Cecilia. He knows everything." "Then we need to act now," Cecilia replied. "Tomorrow, we take everything to the police, before he has a chance to vanish." That night, Vivian didn't sleep. She stayed reviewing all the evidence they'd collected, making sure nothing was missing, that they'd built a solid case. At 5 in the morning, her mobile rang. It was Lauren, her voice desperate. "He cleared the accounts. All the money's gone. Vivian, he really is fleeing." Panic hit her. If Marcus disappeared, all those weeks of investigation would be useless. "We call the police now," Vivian said. "We can't wait anymore." But when they went to file the report that morning, they discovered something that would make everything even more complicated. Marcus hadn't just fled with the money, he had disappeared completely. The police station smelled of stale coffee and paper forms. Vivian sat in a hard chair, surrounded by the other 3 women and Cecilia. The detective in front of them, a middle-aged man with deep dark circles, leafed through the stacks of documents they'd brought. "This is extensive," he admitted, adjusting his glasses. "You've done considerable investigative work. And now," Lauren asked, impatient, "will you look for him?" "We will, but I need to be honest." The detective leaned back in his chair. "Bigamy cases are complicated when marriages aren't legally registered. Technically, without official registration, there's no crime of bigamy." "But there's fraud," Beatrice protested, instinctively caressing her belly. "He stole money, manipulated properties." "Yes, and that's prosecutable, but building a case will take time. And if he really fled the country, as you suspect—" "So he just gets away with it?" Simone asked, incredulous. "I'm not saying that. I'm saying this won't be quick or easy." They left the police station with a feeling of bitter frustration. They'd done all the investigative work, gathered concrete evidence, but the system moved at glacial speed. "I can't keep waiting," Lauren said as they walked down the street. "I need to recover my lands or I'll lose everything." "I'll help you with that," Cecilia promised. "We can file a separate civil suit. We don't need to wait for the criminal one." But they all knew civil suits were expensive and time-consuming, and Lauren's money was in the Cayman Islands, irrecoverable. In the following days, the reality of the situation settled in. Marcus had disappeared like smoke. His flats were empty, his phones disconnected, bank accounts cleared. He'd planned this meticulously, just as he'd planned every lie, every manipulation. Vivienne returned to the flat she'd shared with him. The curtains she'd chosen still swayed gently in the wind. The plants on the balconies needed water. Everything seemed exactly as it was, but at the same time completely different. She walked through the rooms, seeing the marks of the life she thought she'd have. The kitchen where she'd prepared dinners that went cold while waiting, the bedroom where she believed she was safe, the office where he probably laughed at her while updating her vulnerable profile. She sat on the living room floor hugging her knees, and for the first time since the discovery, she allowed herself to cry not over the betrayal, but over the grief, over the version of herself who believed in fairy tales, over the naivety she'd never recover, over the trust that had been broken so completely she doubted she could trust anyone again. Cecilia found her like that hours later. "Dear, you can't stay here alone," she said, sitting on the floor beside her. "I was such an idiot." "No. You were human. You were kind. You were hopeful. None of that is idiocy. But look where it brought me. It brought you here, yes, but it also brought you to Lauren, Beatrice, Simone. It brought you to people who, despite being broken, are fighting together. It brought you to a new version of yourself, stronger than before. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't never breaking, Vivian. It's breaking and still continuing. They sat in silence for a while. Then Cecilia helped Vivian stand up. You need to leave here. This flat has too many ghosts. Where do I go? To my house for now. Then we'll see. Vivian packed with her few real belongings. Everything Marcus had bought was left behind. She didn't want anything that reminded her of him. She moved to Cecilia's flat temporarily. The neighbor insisted she stay as long as she needed, but Vivian knew she couldn't depend on strangers' kindness forever. She needed to rebuild her life. She got a job at a small bookshop in the center. The salary was modest, but it was honest. She worked surrounded by books, by the smell of paper and ink, and there was something healing about that. Lauren lost a good portion of her lands, but managed to keep the house and a few acres through arduous legal battle. She transformed what remained into a small rural hotel, ironically prospering more on her own than when she had Marcus's help. Beatrice had her baby, a girl she named Sophie. It was a difficult birth, but she had the other 3 women by her side throughout the process. The baby was born into an unconventional family, but filled with mutual love and support. Simone moved closer, realizing she needed that support group more than the isolation of her town. She found a job at a local school, teaching children and rediscovering her own strength in the process. 3 months after Marcus's disappearance, the detective called. We found him. Vivian felt her stomach tighten. Where? Europe. But we won't get extradition easily. It'll take years, maybe never happen. Is he with someone else? A long pause. Do you really want to know? Yes. He's married again, or at least living with someone and presenting himself as married. Of course he was. Men like Marcus didn't change. They just found new hunting grounds. Can we warn her? Vivian asked. Technically, no, but I also can't stop you from using the internet to find publicly available information. It was all they needed to hear. They found the woman, a 30-year-old French woman named Amélie. Vivian spent weeks writing a letter, translating to French with help from online tools, explaining everything, attaching evidence, begging her to investigate. They sent it and waited. Weeks passed without response. Then one day an email arrived. Reading those words brought more satisfaction than any trial could. It wasn't justice in the traditional sense. Marcus remained free, probably already planning his next victim, but they saved one woman, and maybe they could save others. They created a website, simple, direct. Women Against Predators, a space where victims of men like Marcus could share stories, seek resources, warn others. The site grew. Other women began to appear, not just Marcus's victims, but victims of other men who used similar tactics. Catfishing, emotional bigamy, romantic fraud. Each story was a reminder that the problem was bigger than one man. It was systemic. Vivian found herself transformed. The 23-year-old who believed love conquered everything no longer existed. In her place was a 24-year-old woman, scarred but not broken, who understood that true love never asks you to ignore red flags, never lives in secrets, never makes you smaller. 6 months after Marcus's disappearance, Vivian was at the bookshop when a man entered. Tall, well-dressed but casual, easy smile. He browsed the shelves, then approached the counter where she worked. Excuse me, can you recommend something to read on long journeys? Vivian analyzed him instinctively, looking for signs she now knew to recognize, but he seemed genuine, his eyes kind, his body language open. Depends, she replied cautiously. What do you like to read? They talked for a few minutes about literature. He was a solicitor, traveled frequently for work. He bought 3 books and thanked her for the recommendations. Sorry if I'm being forward, he said before leaving, but may I come back another day? I liked your suggestions. Vivian felt that familiar tightness in her chest, the voice in her head screaming danger, even though there was nothing obviously wrong. The bookshop is open Monday to Saturday, she replied professionally. He smiled, understanding the message, and left without insisting. That night, Vivian told Cecilia about the encounter. And what did you feel? The neighbor asked. Fear, automatic distrust, as if every man were a potential Marcus. That's natural after what you went through, but Vivian, you can't let Marcus steal your ability to trust forever. Maybe it's safer not to trust. Safer, but also lonelier, and you deserve more than loneliness. The solicitor returned, and returned again. Always polite, always respectful of Vivian's boundaries. She learned his name was Daniel. He was 32, divorced with no children. "Why the divorce?" she asked one day, her voice sharper than intended. He wasn't offended. "We married too young. We wanted different things from life. It was amicable. We're still friends today." "Do you see her often?" "Occasionally. She remarried. She's very happy." I was happy for her. Each answer was tested against what Vivian now knew to look for, but Daniel passed all the tests, which left her more confused than reassured. "May I invite you for coffee?" he finally asked after weeks of brief conversations at the bookshop. "I don't know if I'm ready." "That's fine. When you are, the offer stands." His honesty, his patience was disconcerting. Vivian was used to pressure, to manipulation disguised as romance. This was different, but different scared as much as the familiar. 2 months passed. The website they'd created continued growing. Vivian received daily messages from women sharing stories, asking for advice, thanking her for not being alone anymore. But reading each story was like reopening wounds. Every account of manipulation, every description of empty promises, every digital tear shed took her back to that night when she discovered the profiles. "Shall you need to step back a bit?" Cecilia suggested, seeing Vivian in the kitchen at 3 a.m. responding to emails. "This is consuming you. These women need help. And so do you. Vivian, when was the last time you went out? Did something just for pleasure?" She couldn't remember. Her life had become work at the bookshop and work on the website. Sleeping, when she managed, was populated by nightmares where Marcus had 1,000 different faces. Lauren called that week. "I need you to come here, it's important." Vivian took the bus to Meadowbrook. Lauren's house was different. The small rural hotel had been officially inaugurated. There was a new sign at the entrance, well-kept gardens, and a couple of guests having breakfast on the veranda. "It's beautiful," Vivian said sincerely. "Thank you. But I didn't call you to show this." Lauren led her to the back of the property, where a small building was being erected. "I'm going to transform this barn into a retreat space for women who need to rebuild their lives after abusive relationships." Vivian felt her eyes sting. "Lauren, this is inspired by you, by us. I thought, why not use this pain for something productive, something that helps others?" "But the cost. I've already talked to Cecilia. She knows people who want to invest in social projects, and Beatrice is helping create an administrative structure. Simone will give craft and empowerment workshops, but we need you." "Me? For what?" "To coordinate, to be the face of the project. Vivian, you saved me, Beatrice, Simone, Amélie in France. You have this ability to see through lies and still maintain compassion. It's rare." The proposal was tempting but frightening. It would mean diving even deeper into this world of pain and recovery. "I need to think about it." "Of course, but think about this. You can spend your whole life reliving your own story, or you can help others write different endings." Returning home on the bus, Vivian watched the landscape through the window. Fields where horses grazed freely, small houses with lights in the windows, lives being lived, people moving forward. She was stuck in a loop of anger and hurt that she realized with a shock Marcus still controlled. He disappeared but continued stealing her peace, her ability to live fully. Back in the city, she did something she hadn't done in months, walked aimlessly. Entered parks, sat on benches, observed people. She saw couples holding hands and didn't feel just bitterness, but also a pang of envy. She wanted to believe again. She wanted to be able to look at someone and not immediately search for hidden lies. Daniel saw her first. He was sitting on a nearby bench, reading one of the books she'd recommended. "Vivienne?" he approached cautiously. "What a coincidence." "Yes. You look troubled. Is everything all right?" And there, without planning, she told him. Not everything, but enough. She talked about trusting the wrong person, about being deceived, about how she now saw threats where perhaps none existed. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a moment. "Can I tell you something I learned from divorce?" he finally spoke. "That being hurt is part of being alive, but letting hurt define you is a choice. And I know it seems impossible now, but you'll be able to trust again. Maybe not blindly and completely like before, but more wisely." "How do you know?" "Because I also doubted everyone after the divorce. I thought the problem was trusting. But the problem was trusting without discernment. Now I trust, but with eyes open." The words resonated. Trust with eyes open. Was it possible? "That coffee," she heard herself say. "Is the offer still standing?" He smiled. "Always." They went to a small cafe, full of natural light and the smell of vanilla. They talked for hours. He spoke about growing up in a large family, about choosing law because he wanted to help people, about his love for travel and photography. She spoke about books, about her family in the countryside, about how she was trying to rebuild a life that had collapsed. She didn't mention Marcus specifically, and Daniel didn't press for details. When they said goodbye, he didn't ask for her number, didn't schedule the next meeting, just said, "Thank you for the company. If you want to repeat it someday, I'll be around," and left, giving her total control over the pace, over the next steps. That night, Vivian called Lauren. "I accept. I want to coordinate the retreat project." The shout of joy on the other end of the line made her smile, really smile, for the first time in a long while. The following months were of intense work. Lauren's retreat took shape more quickly than they'd expected. Donations came from unexpected places, women who'd suffered similar abuse and now had resources to help others. Vivienne moved to Meadowbrook, helping structure the space. The barn was transformed into 5 cozy rooms, a large communal room with a fireplace, and a big kitchen where women could cook together, rediscovering pleasure in simple things. "Fresh Start," Beatrice suggested as a name. "Direct, honest." "I like it," Simone agreed. "No euphemisms. It's exactly what we offer." Fresh Start Retreat opened on an autumn morning. The first guest was a 45-year-old woman who'd spent 20 years in a relationship where she was constantly diminished. She arrived with just a small suitcase and empty eyes. "How long can I stay?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. "As long as you need," Vivian replied. "There's no rush here." In the first weeks, they had 4 guests, women of different ages, different stories, but all sharing that look, a mixture of desperate hope and paralyzing fear that they'd never be able to stand up again. Vivian organized group sessions where they could talk. Not professional therapy, for that they brought volunteer psychologists, but moments of safe sharing. "Have you heard of gaslighting?" she asked in one of these sessions. A woman timidly raised her hand. "My ex always said I was crazy, that I made things up. Over time, I started to believe it." "That's gaslighting," Vivian explained. "And it's not you. It's a manipulation tactic to make you doubt your own reality." Seeing recognition in their faces, seeing tears of relief at finally having words to name what they'd suffered, was transformative. For them, but also for Vivienne. Daniel came to visit her occasionally. He always warned beforehand, always respected if she said she was busy. They'd walk through the fields, talk about books and life, and slowly, Vivian felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. "Why are you so patient?" she asked one day. "Because you're worth the wait," he replied simply. "But you don't even really know me." "I know enough. I know you transformed pain into help, that you see people, really see them, that you're strong even when you don't realize it. That's more than enough." For the first time, Vivian considered that perhaps there could be men different from Marcus, that perhaps her experience, though devastating, wasn't universal, but fear was still there, whispering, "What if he's lying too? What if he's just better at hiding?" One night after Daniel left from another visit, Cecilia, who'd come to spend the weekend at the retreat, sat with her. "You're afraid of him." "Not of him specifically, but of trusting again, yes. Vivian, can I give you advice from someone who's lived a lot? Don't trust blindly, but also don't let Marcus steal all your possibilities of happiness. Daniel seems genuine. We checked everything about him when he started showing up here. I'm a solicitor, remember? Everything he said is true. He really is amicably divorced. Really works where he says he works. Doesn't have skeletons in the closet. You investigated him? Of course I investigated. And you know what I found? A decent person who genuinely seems to like you. Vivian didn't know whether to laugh or be indignant. You didn't find it invasive? Would you prefer I hadn't checked and you stayed in doubt forever? She had a point. 3 months after the retreat opened, they received a call that would change everything again. It was the detective. We found Marcus again, and this time we have something more solid. Her heart raced. What? He tried to pull a scam on a wealthy businesswoman in Switzerland. She got suspicious, investigated, and we got concrete proof connecting him to fraud in 6 countries. Vivian, this time we can arrest him. The news was simultaneously triumphant and disturbing. It would mean reliving everything in court. It would mean facing him again. You'll need witnesses. You, Lauren, Beatrice, Simone. All the women he deceived. When? It'll still take months, but it'll happen. She gathered the others to tell them, sitting in the retreat's communal room, with the fireplace crackling and hot tea in their hands. They processed the information. I don't know if I can see him again, Beatrice admitted, Sophie sleeping in her arms. Look at my daughter's father and— You don't have to, Cecilia intervened. Testimonies can be given by video. No one will be forced to be in the same room as him. But I want to, Lauren said, surprising everyone. I want to look him in the eyes while he hears each lie, each manipulation. I want him to see he didn't break us. Simone agreed. Vivian hesitated, then nodded too. Beatrice was still uncertain. Think about it, Vivian said gently. We have time. But time was deceptive, because while they waited for the trial, life continued, bringing new challenges. One of the retreat's guests attempted suicide. Fortunately, Vivian found her in time. Ambulance, hospital, psychiatric support. The woman survived, but the incident deeply shook everyone. We're not equipped for such severe cases, Lauren said, visibly shaken. We need more professional structure. They brought permanent psychologists, established emergency protocols, transformed the retreat into something more formal, more prepared. And in that process, Vivian realized she'd found her purpose. It wasn't just about Marcus. It was about all the women who, like her, had been deceived, diminished, manipulated. It was about creating a safe space where healing was possible. But she also realized she was using work as a shield. She dived so deeply into helping others that she didn't have to deal with her own incomplete healing. Daniel noticed. You're hiding, he said during a walk. I'm not. I'm working. You're burying yourself in work so you don't have to feel. What if I don't want to feel, she retorted, defensive. Feeling hurts. It hurts, but it also heals. Vivienne, you can't spend your whole life in the waiting room of your own life, afraid to enter and really live. The words hit her like a punch, because he was right. She was waiting, waiting to feel ready, waiting for all the scars to heal, waiting for some impossible guarantee that she'd never be hurt again. But life didn't come with guarantees. That night, alone in her room at the retreat, Vivienne made a list. On one side, everything Marcus had stolen from her, trust, naivety, faith in love. On the other side, everything she'd gained, strength, wisdom, purpose, true friendships. The second column was surprisingly longer. She realized then that Marcus hadn't destroyed her. He'd transformed her, yes, but not into something broken, into something more resilient, deeper, more real. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take the next step. The summons arrived 6 months later. Marcus's trial would be in Geneva, where they'd arrested him after trying to defraud the Swiss businesswoman. Vivian, Lauren, Simone, and Beatrice were called as key witnesses. They got subsidized tickets and left together, 4 women who shared trauma, but also transformation. On the plane, while crossing clouds that looked like cotton, they talked about what they'd say. I want him to know Sophie is better off without him, Beatrice said, showing a photo of her daughter on her mobile. that she'll grow up knowing what a good man really is. I want my lands back, Lauren admitted. I know it might sound petty, but that property is family heritage. He has no right to it. I just want him to pay, Simone spoke, her voice hard, to feel real consequences for the first time in his life. They all looked at Vivienne. She paused, thinking, I want him to understand he didn't destroy us, that he tried, but failed. Geneva was a city of cinematic beauty, impossibly blue lake, mountains in the background, architecture that seemed from another century, but they barely noticed. They were focused on the court, on the imminent confrontation. The night before the hearing, they gathered in Vivienne's hotel room. Cecilia, who'd traveled with them, reviewed the testimonies. Be factual, not too emotional but not cold either. Judges respond to truth presented with dignity. What if I cry? Beatrice asked. It's okay to cry. Just don't let tears make you forget the facts. Vivienne barely slept. She dreamed of Marcus, but not as he was. She dreamed of all his versions. Marcus the attentive husband, Marcus the liar, Marcus the predator, Marcus the pathetic man trying to justify the unjustifiable. She woke before dawn, watching the lake from the window. She tried to gather courage but felt surprisingly calm. She was no longer afraid of him. She was angry, yes, but focused, productive anger. The court was intimidating. High walls, dark wood, that heavy silence that only judgment places possess. They sat on the prosecution side, lawyers explaining procedures in English and French. Then he entered. Marcus looked smaller than Vivienne remembered. He still had that upright bearing, that face she'd once found handsome. But now she saw only a mask. There was nothing real there, just careful construction designed to deceive. His eyes swept the room, finding each of them. Vivienne saw surprise, then something that might have been shame, quickly replaced by that neutral expression he used when calculating his next move. He couldn't manipulate here. He had no power. And seeing him powerless was strangely liberating. The trial lasted 3 days. Prosecutors presented evidence meticulously, fake documents, fraudulent accounts, testimonies from dozens of deceived women over years. Marcus had built a criminal empire, and now everything was publicly collapsing. On the second day, Vivienne was called to the witness stand. She swore to tell the truth. She sat, hands steady, voice clear. She told her story, how he appeared at a vulnerable moment, how he studied her weaknesses, how he built an entire relationship on lies, how she discovered, how she investigated, how she gathered other victims. And how do you feel about the accused now? The prosecutor asked. Vivienne looked directly at Marcus. I feel pity, because he'll never know what it is to truly love someone. He only knows transactions, manipulations. And that's a very empty life. She saw something flash in his eyes, anger perhaps, or recognition that she'd completely turned the tables. Marcus's defense lawyer tried to discredit her. Isn't it true that you were looking for a relationship out of financial interest? No. But the accused was significantly wealthier. Wasn't that attractive? He seemed wealthier. Everything was illusion. And I married because I believed I loved him, not for money. Aren't you just embarrassed at having been deceived and now seeking revenge? Vivienne took a deep breath. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm seeking justice. There's a difference. Revenge would be wanting to hurt him personally. Justice is ensuring he faces legal consequences and that other women are spared from suffering the same. The lawyer had no more questions. Lauren testified after, emotional but firm in describing how she lost family lands. Simone spoke about forced isolation. Beatrice, though fearful, appeared via video conference and spoke about raising a daughter of a man who was never real. Other women testified, some in person, others virtually. Each story added a layer to the portrait of a serial predator. On the third day, Marcus was invited to speak. He stood, that impeccable suit that was probably the last expensive piece he owned. I never wanted to hurt anyone, he began, voice trying to sound contrite but that Vivienne recognized as performance. I have a problem. I recognize that now. I can't be content. I always need more, new, different. Are you claiming relationship addiction? The judge asked, skeptical. Not exactly, but there's something broken in me. and I know that doesn't justify what I did, but perhaps it explains it. You're alleging that you stole properties, forged documents, committed bigamy in multiple jurisdictions, the judge continued. That's not impulse, Mr. Fitzgerald. That's meticulous criminal planning. Marcus had no answer for that. The verdict came quickly. Guilty on all charges. 14 years in prison plus financial restitution to all victims. When the sentence was pronounced, Vivian didn't feel the expected triumph. She felt only closure. A chapter finally closed. They left the court into daylight. The sun was bright, almost offensively cheerful given the weight of the moment. "It's over," Lauren said, and there was disbelief in her voice. "It's really over." "Not completely," Cecilia corrected gently. "You'll still have to deal with emotional consequences for a long time, but the criminal part, yes, that's over." That night, they celebrated discreetly at a restaurant by the lake. It wasn't a celebration of victory, but of survival. They'd faced the monster and come out whole, if not unscathed. "A toast," Beatrice raised her glass of juice, still breastfeeding, "to women who refuse to be victims forever." They all toasted, and in that moment, Vivian felt something fundamentally shift inside her. Marcus was the past, definitively, irrevocably the past. Now she needed to decide what to do with the future. They returned to Britain different, still scarred, still processing trauma, but with an enormous weight removed from their shoulders. Marcus was imprisoned. There was justice, albeit imperfect. The retreat continued growing. It now had a waiting list. Women from all over the country wanting that safe space for reconstruction. Vivian hired more staff, expanded programs, transformed the initial project into a solid institution. But also, for the first time, she began to think about her own life beyond work. Daniel hadn't pressured during the months. He'd maintained a constant but respectful presence, waiting for her to come to him when ready. A week after returning from Geneva, Vivian sought him out. "That coffee you offered months ago," she said when he answered the phone, "is it still on the table?" Brief silence. Then she could hear the smile in his voice. "Always." They met at the small cafe, the same as the first time, but now it felt different. Vivian wasn't in survival mode, wasn't automatically searching for lies. "How was Geneva?" he asked. "Difficult, liberating, necessary." "You seem lighter." "I feel it. Like I'd been carrying a weight for so long I'd forgotten what it was like to walk without it." They talked for hours. He spoke about a recent labor law case he'd won, she about the retreat's expansion. They laughed at silly jokes, and for the first time, Vivian allowed herself to look at him not as a potential threat, but as a possibility. "Can I ask you something?" she said as the sun began to set. "Of course." "Why did you wait? It was months. You could have moved on, found someone less complicated." Daniel set down his cup, looking directly into her eyes. "Because from the first conversation at the bookshop, I knew you were worth any wait, and because I respect what you went through too much to rush you into something that needs to happen in your own time. And if I was never ready, then I'd have continued in your life as a friend and been grateful to have known you in any way." His honesty, the complete absence of games, was almost disconcerting. "I don't know if I'm good at this," she admitted. "Relationships, trusting, opening my heart again. I'm damaged." "You're not damaged. You're scarred. And scars show you survived, not that you're broken." Tears came, not from sadness, but from relief. "Can I go slowly?" "As slowly as you need." And so they began. Not with overwhelming passion or grandiose promises, but with quiet honesty and infinite patience. Occasional dinners, long walks, conversations that stretched for hours. Daniel met Lauren, Beatrice, Simone, and Cecilia. He passed their rigorous test, especially Cecilia's, who interviewed him as if cross-examining an opposing lawyer. "He passes," she declared afterward. "He's genuine. Rare, but genuine." Months passed. Vivian discovered that opening her heart again wasn't a single event, but a process. Each layer of protection she removed was a conscious act of courage. She had moments of panic, nights where mistrust returned, where each delayed message from Daniel made alarms go off in her head. But he was patient, showed his phone, explained delays without being offended by her mistrust. "You went through trauma," he said once when she apologized for an unfounded jealous outburst. "That doesn't disappear because you want it to. I understand, and I'll prove as many times as necessary that I'm worthy of trust." 6 months into the relationship, Daniel took her to meet his family. They were warm, welcoming, and visibly relieved to see him happy. "He was so lonely after the divorce," his mother confided to Vivian. "It's good to see him really smile again." Meeting his ex-wife was surreal but necessary. Marina was an elegant woman with short hair, pregnant with her second child with her new husband. "Daniel is a good man," she told Vivian without preamble. "It didn't work between us because we wanted different things, but he's incapable of being dishonest. Take care of him." It was so different from everything she'd experienced with Marcus that Vivian sometimes needed to remind herself this was real, that healthy relationships existed. A year after the trial, Fresh Start Retreat held an anniversary event. More than 50 women had passed through there, each at a different stage of healing. They organized a ceremony where each woman who wanted could share her story. Not mandatory, but a safe space for those who needed to be heard. One by one, women stood up. They spoke of abuse, manipulation, courage to leave. They spoke of reconstruction, of children they'd protected, of lives they'd reclaimed. When it was Vivian's turn, she hesitated, then stood up. 2 years ago, she began, I believed in a man who didn't exist. He studied me, manipulated me, and almost destroyed me. But the important word there is almost, because I'm here, I'm standing. And I'm not just standing, I'm living. She looked around the room, seeing faces that reflected her own journey. I learned that trauma doesn't define us. How we respond to it, that defines us. I may have been a victim, but I refuse to remain a victim. I'm a survivor, and each of you is too. Applause filled the room. But what Vivian valued most were the hugs afterward, the whispers of thank you and you saved my life. Lauren approached, eyes shining. "Do you realize what you've created here? It's not just a retreat, it's a movement. You've given voice to women who thought they'd never be heard." "We created," Vivian corrected. "You, me, Beatrice, Simone, Cecilia, we did it together. But you were the spark. You transformed pain into purpose." That night, lying beside Daniel, in her own house now, she'd moved from Cecilia's flat into her own space, Vivian reflected on the journey. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, fingers tracing lazy circles on her arm. "About how 2 years ago I was lost. I thought I knew who I was, but I was living a version of myself created by someone else. And now? Now I know who I am. Scarred but whole, cautious but capable of trusting, realistic but still hopeful. I love this version of you." She turned to look at him. "You've never said that before." "I know. I was waiting for the right moment." "And this is the right moment?" "It seems to be. But if it's too soon—" "It's not," she interrupted. "And Daniel, I love you too." The words were frightening but liberating, because they were real, based on time, patience, and honesty, not on manipulation or fantasy. For the first time since she'd said yes to Marcus in that small church years ago, Vivian felt she was making a truly free choice, a choice based on who she really was, not on who someone had manipulated her into believing she should be. 2 years after the trial, a letter arrived. Thin paper, familiar handwriting. Marcus. Vivian held the envelope for a long time before opening it. She was on her house's veranda, the afternoon sun warming her face. Daniel was working. She had the afternoon free. Vivian read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation, for games, but it seemed genuine. Or perhaps he'd just gotten better at faking remorse. She didn't know what to do with it. She took the letter to her therapy session. She'd started seeing a psychologist after Geneva, recognizing she also needed professional help. "How do you feel about it?" the therapist asked. "Confused, angry, and strangely empty. I expected a letter from him to affect me more one way or another." "That's healthy. It means he no longer has emotional power over you." "But what about forgiveness?" "Therapists always talk about forgiveness." "Forgiveness isn't for him, it's for you. And it doesn't have to be complete or perfect. It can be, I forgive you for my sake. but I'll never forget or trust you." Vivienne thought about it. Could she forgive Marcus and still hate him? Could she recognize his humanity without excusing his actions? She decided not to answer the letter, but also not to throw it away. She kept it in a box with other memories from that period, not to revisit frequently, but to remember where she came from. That week, Sophie, Beatrice and Marcus's daughter, turned 2. The party was at the retreat, the yard full of colourful balloons and children running. Vivienne watched the girl with curly hair and a wide smile. She had Marcus's eyes, the same dark shade. But everything else was Beatrice, the kindness, the joy, the innocence. "She'll never know him," Beatrice said, coming to stand beside Vivienne. "I decided. When she asks, I'll tell her an age-appropriate truth, but I won't take her to visit him in prison. How do you feel about that? Guilty sometimes, like I'm depriving her of a father. But then I remember his presence would be more damaging than his absence. She deserves to be protected." Vivienne hugged her friend. "You're an incredible mother, and Sophie is happy. Look at her." The girl ran between the adults laughing when Lauren picked her up and spun her. "I'll tell her about you," Beatrice continued, "about how strong women support each other, how we can stand up even when they try to knock us down. She'll grow up knowing she doesn't need a man to be complete." "But that she can have a good man if she wants," Vivienne added, looking at Daniel playing with the children. "Exactly." The party was joyful, full of light and love, and seeing all those women she'd met in their darkest moments now genuinely smiling, Vivienne realized they'd created a chosen family, not connected by blood, but by shared survival and mutual support. Weeks later, Cecilia organized a dinner at her flat. The 5 original women, Vivienne, Lauren, Beatrice, Simone, and herself. "What's with all this formality?" Lauren asked when she arrived and saw the table set with candles and everything. "Because we need to mark this," Cecilia explained. 3 years since we met under terrible circumstances. And look at us now." She raised her glass. "Lauren, you not only recovered your lands, but built a prosperous business. Beatrice, you're a wonderful mother and went back to university. Simone, you found your calling in teaching and you're engaged. And Vivienne, you created an entire movement that's already helped hundreds of women. And you," Vivienne added, "were the glue that kept us together when we were falling apart." Cecilia smiled, eyes shining with tears she didn't shed. "I was a solicitor for 40 years. I helped many people, but nothing compares to helping you. You gave me purpose in retirement." They had dinner and talked for hours. They remembered difficult moments with a mixture of horror and humor. They celebrated small and large victories. "Does anyone still have contact with Amélie?" Simone asked. "Yes." Beatrice grabbed her mobile. "She sent me photos. She's engaged too, marrying a woman. She said the experience with Marcus made her realize she wasn't really attracted to men." "Marcus managed the feat of making her a lesbian," Lauren joked, drawing laughter from everyone. It was a moment of genuine lightness, not forced. They were friends now, not just victims connected by shared trauma. At the end of the night, as they were saying goodbye, Cecilia held Vivienne's hand. "You know I'm an atheist, right?" "I know. But sometimes I think maybe there is something greater, because what were the chances of all of us meeting exactly when we needed to, of transforming tragedy into a healing movement?" Vivienne squeezed her hand. "Maybe it's not fate. Maybe it's just strong women choosing not to surrender to what they tried to do to them." "Maybe," Cecilia agreed. "Or maybe it's both." Driving home through the empty night streets, Vivienne thought about forgiveness. She wouldn't forgive Marcus completely, she realized, and she was okay with that. Forgiveness wasn't binary, either total or non-existent. It could exist on a spectrum. She forgave him enough not to let anger consume her, but not enough to invite him back into her life in any way. And that was acceptable. Arriving home, she found Daniel waiting up, reading in the living room. "Good night?" he asked. "The best." She snuggled beside him on the sofa. "You know, I got a letter from Marcus." She felt immediate tension in his body. What did he want? To apologize, I think, or perform apologizing. I'm not sure. "And how did you feel?" "Empty. In a good way. He doesn't affect me anymore like he used to. Daniel kissed the top of her head. That's quite a bit of progress. It is. And Daniel? Yes? Thank you for waiting, for being patient, for being real. Always, he replied simply. And in that moment, in her small but own house beside the man she'd chosen freely and consciously, Vivienne felt a peace she never knew was possible after everything she'd been through. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real. 4 years after meeting Marcus, 3 years after the trial, Vivienne received unexpected news. Marcus would be released early for good behavior. The information came via email from the prosecution lawyer. She was at the retreat when she read it, coordinating a workshop on financial reconstruction after abusive relationships. She needed to excuse herself, leave the room, sit on a garden bench. Her hands trembled holding the mobile. Cecilia found her minutes later. You're pale. What happened? Vivienne showed the email. He's getting out, after only 3 years. They're releasing him. For good behavior, Cecilia read, her voice hard. Of course, he's an expert at manipulating even prison guards. What if he comes after me, after us? There's a restraining order. He can't approach any of you. Restraining orders are just paper. You know that. Cecilia knew. She'd worked enough cases where restraining orders were ignored with terrible consequences. We'll take precautions. Inform the local police. Reinforce the retreat's security. Is Daniel armed? What? No, and he won't be. We're not going to live in armed fear. Then at least a proper alarm system in your house. Vivienne agreed, but part of her rebelled against the idea of going back to living in fear, of letting Marcus steal the peace so hardly won. She gathered Lauren, Beatrice, and Simone virtually to tell them the news. This is ridiculous, Lauren exploded. 3 years for ruining so many lives? The system is broken, Simone agreed bitterly. What do we do? Beatrice asked Sophie, visible in the background, playing. We prepare, Vivienne decided, but not with fear, with awareness. We know how he operates. We won't be caught by surprise again. But saying was easier than doing. In the weeks leading up to Marcus's release, Vivienne slept poorly. Every noise in the house made her wake up. She checked locks multiple times, avoided going out alone after dark. Daniel noticed but didn't press. He just became more present, sleeping at her house more frequently, accompanying her when she needed to go out. I can't protect you from everything, he admitted one night, but I can be by your side while you face whatever comes. The release happened on a rainy Tuesday. Vivienne knew because the detective called. He was released at 7 this morning. He has an electronic tracker for 6 months. If he comes near any of you, we'll be alerted immediately. And after 6 months? We'll have to deal with that when we get there. It wasn't a comforting answer. Days passed, then weeks. No sign of Marcus. Vivienne began to relax, minimally. Maybe he really had changed. Maybe prison had transformed him. Then, 1 month after his release, a letter arrived. Different from the previous one. Thicker, certified. Vivienne opened it with Daniel present. Inside were legal papers. Marcus was suing her, Lauren, Beatrice, and Simone for defamation and damage to reputation. This is absurd, Daniel read over her shoulder. He was convicted. It's in public record. There's no defamation when you tell proven truth. But it's an intimidation strategy, Vivienne realized, her hands beginning to tremble. He wants to scare us, make us spend money on lawyers, make us shut up about him. It won't work. I have colleagues specialized in cases like this. We'll knock this down easily. But it wasn't about winning or losing legally. It was about the message. I can still affect your lives. Vivienne called an emergency meeting at the retreat. The 4 women, Cecilia, and lawyers that Daniel brought. He can't win this, one of the lawyers explained, but he can make it painful. The process can drag on for years if he wants. So we stop him, Lauren said firmly. We make a counter-offensive. We sue him for what? The lawyer interrupted gently. He's already been tried and convicted. He's already paid legally, even if the sentence was absurdly short. Suing him again would just be throwing money away. So we let him intimidate us, Simone asked, frustrated. No, Cecilia intervened. We do something he doesn't expect. We ignore him completely. Silence as everyone processed. A defamation suit only works if we react with fear, she continued. If we continue speaking the truth, if we maintain the retreat, if we don't hide, we show he has no power over us. What if he escalates? Beatrice asked. What if he shows up in person? He won't, Daniel said with certainty. Men like Marcus are cowards at heart. He uses manipulation and legal systems because direct confrontation scares him. He knows if he shows up here, he'll have 4 women who aren't afraid of him anymore. They decided to follow Cecilia's advice. They wouldn't respond to the lawsuit, would let lawyers deal with technical aspects while they continued their lives. But Vivian wanted to do something more, something definitive. I'm going to see him, she announced. What? No! Multiple voices protested simultaneously. I need to look him in the eyes and say I'm not afraid anymore. In person. Vivian, there's a restraining order, Cecilia reminded, which I can waive temporarily. Let me do this, please. Daniel pulled her aside. Why put yourself through this? Because as long as he's in this position of perceived power, a part of me will always be afraid. I need to break that by confronting him on my terms, in my time. Then I'm coming with you. No, I need to do this alone. He didn't like it, but he respected it. It took 2 weeks to arrange. Lawyers negotiated a supervised meeting at a neutral office. Marcus agreed, probably curious. The day arrived cold and overcast. Vivian dressed carefully, dress trousers, simple but elegant blouse. Not to impress him, but to feel in control. The office was clinical, all white and glass. Marcus was already there when she arrived, sitting at a conference table. A supervisor, a neutral lawyer, watched from the corner. He looked different, thinner, grey hair at the temples, deeper lines on his face. Prison had aged him. Vivian, he stood up. Sit down, she ordered, her voice firm. He obeyed, clear surprise in his expression. She remained standing, positioning herself to look down at him. I'm going to speak, you're going to listen. Then we'll never have to be in the same environment again. He opened his mouth, then closed it, nodding. You hurt me. Not just emotionally, though, that was devastating, but you stole time, you stole trust, you stole innocence I'll never recover. And you know what else? You did it consciously and deliberately. You studied my weaknesses, exploited my kindness, manipulated every interaction. Marcus started to speak. No, she interrupted. You don't have permission to speak. Your turn passed a long time ago. He recoiled, visible shock at seeing this version of Vivian. Strong, controlled, nothing like that shy young woman he'd met. I came here for one reason, she continued. To say you have no more power over me. None. You can sue, you can try to intimidate, you can do whatever you want. But it doesn't affect me anymore. You're just a pathetic man who doesn't know how to live without manipulating others. And I pity you. Vivian, I know apologies aren't enough. You're absolutely right, they're not. And I'm not here to hear apologies, I'm here to close this. This is our last moment sharing space. After this, you don't exist for me. Not as a threat, not as a painful memory. You'll be just a mistake I made and overcame. Tears appeared in his eyes. Vivian didn't know if they were genuine or performance. I loved you, he whispered. No, she said coldly. You loved the control you had over me. You loved the success of your manipulation. But real love? You're incapable of it. And you know what's saddest? You'll grow old alone because you never learned how to genuinely connect with another human being. She turned to leave, then stopped. And Marcus, drop the lawsuit, because if you don't, I'll make public every piece of evidence, every testimony, every lie you told. I'll ensure the name Marcus Augustus Fitzgerald becomes synonymous with predator. You managed to reduce your sentence with good behavior? Great. But you won't escape the court of public opinion. That's a threat, he said weakly. No, it's a promise. You manipulated the legal system, but you can't manipulate truth when it's widely spread. So drop it. Live your pathetic life in peace, and leave me in peace too. She left without looking back. In the descending elevator, she shook violently. She leaned against the wall, breath coming in gasps. But then slowly the trembling passed, replaced by a surreal feeling of lightness. She'd done it. She'd confronted the monster and didn't break. She'd said the truth she needed to say and survived. Daniel was waiting in the lobby. "How was it?" "Liberating," she replied. And it was true. A week later, the lawsuit was dropped. Marcus disappeared again, but this time Vivian didn't care. He was the past, definitively, completely the past. 5 years. Vivian looked at the calendar marking the exact anniversary of that day when she married Marcus. 5 years since she believed in a beautiful lie. She was sitting on the veranda of the house she'd bought, not rented, hers, watching the sunrise. Daniel slept inside. Sophie, Beatrice's daughter, who was spending the weekend with them, was in the guest room. Simple life, but filled with truth. Fresh Start Retreat was now a nationally recognized institution. They'd opened a second location in another county. More than 300 women had gone through the programs. Some returned as volunteers, wanting to give back the help they'd received. Lauren ran the rural hotel business that was flourishing. She had a boyfriend, a gentleman from a neighboring town whom she'd met when he came to stay. They were cautious but happy. Beatrice had completed her degree. Sophie, now 4, was a bright and loved child. Beatrice was dating Sophie's schoolteacher, a relationship that had started timidly but grown into something beautiful. Simone had married her fiancé. Simple but emotional ceremony, where each of the women was present. She taught at a school for vulnerable children, transforming her own trauma into empathy for other vulnerable people. Cecilia, at 75, remained as sharp as ever. She'd become a pro bono legal consultant for abuse survivors, using decades of experience to help those who didn't have resources for expensive lawyers. And Marcus? Vivian occasionally saw his name in online searches. He lived discreetly in a small town, working a mundane administrative job. No news of new relationships, new manipulations. Maybe he'd finally learned his lesson, or maybe he'd just gotten better at hiding. She didn't care anymore. He was a footnote in her story, not the main chapter. Daniel stirred inside the house. She heard coffee being made. Minutes later, he appeared carrying 2 mugs. "Good morning." He kissed the top of her head, handing her coffee. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much has changed in 5 years." "Regret anything?" "The time I lost with Marcus, yes, but not the journey since then, because look where it brought me." Daniel sat beside her. "I have something to ask," he said, suddenly nervous. Vivienne looked at him, heart racing. She knew. Somehow, she knew what was coming. He took a small box from his pocket. "I know marriage can be a complicated concept for you, and I completely understand if it's not something you want again, but Vivienne, these 3 years with you have been the best of my life, and I want more. I want all the rest." So, he opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Vivian's eyes, but not from fear or hesitation, from pure joy. "Yes," she replied without doubt, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, hands trembling slightly. "But," she added, "you need to know. I'll have moments of panic. I'll have days where trauma returns. It won't always be easy." "I know, and I'll be there for every difficult moment, just as for the good ones. And it has to be a small ceremony, nothing elaborate, just people who really matter." "I agree completely. And a truly equal marriage, not the kind where the woman becomes the husband's property." "Vivian," he interrupted gently, "I know who you are. I know what you went through. I'm not asking you to be something you're not. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, but as my wife." She kissed him deeply, allowing herself to feel happiness without guilt, love without fear. The wedding happened 6 months later. Fresh Start Retreat's garden, simple but elegant decoration. 20 guests, close family, true friends. Lauren was maid of honor. Beatrice carried the rings, with Sophie's help. Simone read a poem. Cecilia officiated, having obtained online certification specifically for that moment. Marina, Daniel's ex-wife, was present with her husband and children. There was no animosity, just mutual respect and genuine happiness. Vivian's mother and father came from the countryside. Her father cried throughout the entire ceremony. Afterward, he pulled Daniel aside. "You take good care of her. It wasn't a request. It was an order. "With my life," Daniel promised. When it was time for vows, Vivienne took a deep breath. "Daniel, when I met you, I was broken. I didn't believe I could trust again, love again. You didn't try to fix me. You just stood beside me while I fixed myself. You gave me time, space, patience. You showed me good men exist, that real love is possible. And today, in front of all the people I love most, I promise to spend the rest of my life showing the same love and patience you showed me." There wasn't a dry eye. Daniel wiped his own tears before speaking. "Vivienne, you're the bravest person I know. You took trauma that would destroy most people and transformed it into a movement that saved hundreds. You're strong, compassionate, real. And I feel privileged that, of all the people in the world, you chose to trust me with your heart. I promise to honor that trust every day for the rest of my life." They exchanged simple rings, inscribed with words they'd chosen together. With eyes open, a reminder that true love doesn't require blindness, it requires clarity. The party was joyful, music, dancing, delicious food that Vivienne herself had helped prepare. Sophie taught Daniel to dance to children's music, drawing laughter from everyone. Later, as the sun set painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Vivienne found herself again on that garden bench where so many important conversations had happened. Lauren joined her. "How are you?" "Happy," Vivienne replied, and it was complete truth. "Genuinely, completely happy." "You deserve it." "We deserve it," Vivienne corrected. "All of us. Look at what we built. We didn't just survive, Lauren. We thrived. Remember when we were sitting in my kitchen, trying to understand what Marcus was, feeling like the world had ended?" "I remember. I couldn't imagine feeling happiness again. And now you're married to a good man. You run an institution that changes lives. You have a chosen family that loves you unconditionally." Beatrice and Simone approached, Sophie running ahead. Auntie Viv, the cake." "We're coming, darling," Beatrice calmed her, then looked at her friends. "You know I love you all, right?" "The feeling is mutual," Simone replied, hugging everyone. The four women stood there, embraced, watching the party. 5 years ago they were broken, betrayed, lost. Now they were strong, healed, found. Not because time heals all wounds, that was a lie, but because they actively chose to heal. They chose not to let the man who tried to destroy them have the last word about who they were. Cecilia appeared, carrying Sophie in her arms. "Photo," she declared. "I need a photo of all my girls together." They posed there, in the garden where so much growth had happened. 5 women of different ages, different backgrounds, but united by a shared journey of pain and overcoming. The photographer captured the moment, and in that image, one could see more than just smiling faces. One could see strength, resilience, love that comes from truly knowing darkness and choosing light anyway. That night, lying beside Daniel, her husband now, Vivienne reflected on the complete journey. 5 years ago, Marcus's hand had trembled, touching her face, whispering, "You're safe with me." And she'd believed because she wanted to believe, because she was young and hopeful and didn't yet know that real safety doesn't come from words, but from consistent actions. Now Daniel's hand caressed her arm gently without needing to say anything, because he'd proven day after day, month after month, that he was trustworthy. Not with empty promises, but with constant presence. "Daniel," she whispered in the dark. "I'm safe." He understood the meaning behind the words. "Yes," he replied simply. "You are." And for the first time since that night 5 years ago, when a naive 23-year-old believed in a beautiful lie, Vivienne really felt safe, not because she had a husband to protect her, but because she had inner strength, a support network, knowledge of her own worth that no one could take away. She had survived, but more than that, she had flourished. And as she slept, a small smile on her lips, she dreamed not of the past, but of the future. A future full of possibilities, of real love, of meaningful purpose. Marcus had tried to write her story, but he failed, because in the end, Vivienne became the author of her own life. and she wrote an ending he could never have imagined, not of a victim who never recovered, but of a survivor who transformed pain into power, trauma into triumph. The scars remained. They always would. But they no longer defined who she was. They were just reminders of battles won, of strength she never knew she possessed, of capacity to rise even when they tried to bury her. And now, 5 years after that wedding night based on lies, she had a new wedding night, this one based on truth. The difference was everything, and it made all the difference. Sophie woke everyone at 6 in the morning demanding pancakes. Daniel got up, grumbling about being tired but clearly happy. Vivian watched from bed as he and the girl disappeared into the kitchen, sounds of laughter and clattering pots reaching her. She got up, put on her robe, walked to the kitchen. There, seeing Daniel disastrously trying to make pancakes while Sophie seriously instructed him on proper technique, Vivian felt her heart overflow. This was what real safety looked like, not promises whispered in the dark, but messy breakfast with people who genuinely cared, laughter over burnt pancakes, love demonstrated in small daily actions. She joined them, and together they created a breakfast that would be remembered not for culinary perfection, but for the love and joy that filled every moment. Later, after returning Sophie to Beatrice, Daniel and Vivian walked through the park. "Where do we go from here?" he asked. "Forward," she replied simply. "Always forward." "Specific," he teased. "Okay, let's expand the retreat. Maybe write a book about the experience. Maybe start a family." He stopped walking, looking at her intensely. "A family? You want—" "Children, yes, eventually, when we're ready. Or adoption. There are so many children who need a safe home. Vivian, whatever path we choose, I'll be by your side." "I know," she smiled. "That's why I can finally imagine that future." They continued walking, hands intertwined, discussing dreams and plans. And for the first time, Vivian was making plans that didn't include if or maybe. They were when and we will. Trust had returned, not blind, naive trust of a 23-year-old, but mature trust based on real knowledge of who her partner was. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The sun was beginning to set when they returned home. That same sun that had witnessed so much pain over the years now bathed the world in golden light that promised new beginnings. Vivian stopped at the doorstep, looking back one last time, not at the past, but at the entire journey. Every painful step, every fall, every moment of doubt. All had been necessary to get here, to be who she was now. And then, with Daniel waiting inside and the future stretching luminous ahead, she crossed the threshold. Not to a perfect life. Perfection didn't exist, but to a real life, an honest life. A life where she was truly loved and truly loved in return. And that, she realized with crystal clarity, was much better than any fairy tale Marcus had tried to sell, because it was real, and real was everything she'd ever needed.